On April 16, 2008, I arrived in Athens, Greece. At the airport, I exchanged some money and bought a SIM card for my phone. After picking me up, George and Kristen took me to his parents' house for a quick stop for snacks. Then, we headed into the center of Athens so that I could check into my hotel, the Hotel Parthenon. After I checked in, we headed back to George's parents' house, where George's father and brother had already started roasting a lamb on a spit. We took turns rotating the lamb on the spit. About 6 hours later, the lamb was ready for George's father to carve, and we had dinner with about 20 of George's friends. On my second day in Athens, I left the hotel at around 10 a.m. and walked up Philopapo Hill. The hill provided excellent views of the city and of the Acropolis. Most of the major buildings atop the Acropolis were built during the 5th century BC at the behest of Pericles. The Odeon of Hyodos Atticus was built during Roman times in 160 AD. It was restored in 1955 and is currently used for various performances during the summer. The Theatre of Dionysus was built around 342 BC and is the birthplace of the Greek tragedy. Building of the Parthenon began in 447 BC and it was completed about 9 years later. It was originally built to house a 12-meter tall statue of the goddess Athena. Through the years, the temple has been used as a church as well as a mosque. In 1687, much of the Parthenon was demolished when Venetian cannon fire caused an explosion in the temple, which the Turks were using as an arsenal. In 1801, the British acquired a collection of sculptures and other artifacts called the Parthenon marbles from the occupying Turks. They have yet to be returned. The Erechtheion was built between 421 and 406 BC on the most sacred spot on the Acropolis. According to myth, during a contest between Poseidon and Athena, Poseidon caused a saltwater well to form, while Athena caused an olive tree to sprout. Kristen and George were supposed to meet with me earlier in the day, but they were delayed due to a metro strike. After they finally caught up to me at the front of the Parthenon, we headed to the ancient Agora. This was a market and a place of assembly during ancient Greek times. Two of the main landmarks at the Agora is the reconstruction of the Stoa of Atlas and the Temple of Hephaestus. From the ancient Agora, we walked over to Mykonos Cemetery, and then on to Hadrian's Library, where we met George's brother Leonidas and his brother's girlfriend Chrysola. We also visited the Roman Agora. The Tower of the Winds was built by a Syrian astronomer during the 2nd century BC and was used as both a weather vane and a water clock. After dinner, we went our separate ways and I headed back to the hotel. Since the free Wi-Fi wasn't working, I took the metro to Syntagma Square to take care of some business, and then I headed back to the hotel. On the morning of April 18th, I met Kristen and George outside of the Acropolis metro station, and then we headed to the temple of Olympian Zeus and Hadrian's Arch. Building began during the 6th century BC, and it was eventually completed by Hadrian in 121 AD. The temple originally had 104 Corinthian columns, but only 15 stand today. Next, we walked by the Panathenaic Stadium where the first modern Olympics in 1896 were held. the stadium, we walked to the National Art Gallery and then on to the National Archaeological Museum. At around 3 p.m., we drove a little outside of Athens to the Cape of Sunion to see the Temple of Poseidon. It was built during the 5th century BC. According to myth, this was the site where King Aegeus of Athens jumped to his death because he thought his son Theseus had died while fighting the Minotaur. Theseus was supposed to change the sails of his boat from black to white in order to signify his victory. But he got drunk on the way back and forgot to change them. Before heading back to Athens, we had dinner at a restaurant that had an excellent view of the Cape and the temple. The next morning, I took the metro to the station nearest George's parents' house, and we started on our day trip to Delphi. Along the way, we passed by the town of Arahova, which is a popular ski town in the winter. At around noon, we arrived in Delphi. The ancient Greeks believed that Delphi was the center of the world. The most important landmark was the Temple of Apollo, which is where the Oracle of Delphi foretold the future. According to myth, the oracle told Oedipus that he would kill his father and marry his mother. Although he tried to escape his fate, when he discovered that the prophecy had come true, he gouged his eyes out. After leaving Delphi, we drove to Moni Osius Lucas, or the Monastery of Holy Luke. We had a really hard time finding the monastery. It was built in 1011 and houses the body of Holy Luke, a local hermit and healer. On our way back to Athens, we stopped at Chalkida. Between the mainland and the island of Evia, the tidal current is very noticeable. After walking along the waterfront and having some ice cream and tiramisu, we headed to George's parents' house for dinner. On April 20th, the new Acropolis Museum had its initial opening. Unfortunately, there wasn't much to see as none of the exhibits inside were visible yet. After leaving the museum, I walked around Plaka and Monastiraki to do a little shopping, and then took the metro to George's parents' house for lunch. After lunch, we left for Syntagma Square, where I watched the changing of the guard while Kristen and George went shopping. Later, we met in Plaka and then went to Likavitas Hill to see the excellent nighttime view of the city. On the Easter Vigil, there's a candlelit procession that travels up the hill to the Chapel of Agios Georgios at the top. On April 21st, I checked out of the hotel, dropped off my luggage at George's parents' house, and then headed to Pyrrhus with George, Kristen, Leonidas, and Chrysola to take a flying dolphin hydrofoil to the Saronic Gulf island of Hydra. After checking into the Hotel Argo, we went to a cement beach, had some drinks and snacks at a cafe, and wandered around town. One interesting fact about Hydra is that the island only has 3 cars. 2 are for garbage pickup and the other is for construction needs. Parcels are carried via donkey. After we checked out of our hotel on the 22nd, we spent some time relaxing at a cafe before heading to a different part of the island for lunch. At around 3:30, we left Hydra to go back to Athens. On my second to last full day in Greece, George, Kristen, and I took a hydrofoil to the famous party island of Mykonos. We rented a car so that we could drive to some of the beaches on the island. Unfortunately, it was still the off-season, so all the beaches, including the well-known Super Paradise Beach, were all pretty much empty. After visiting a bunch of empty beaches, we returned to the main town of Hora, had lunch, and walked around a bit before taking a flying cat back to Rafina, where George's father was waiting for us. Outside of going to a large grocery store and a Costco-like store, I didn't really do much during my last full day in Greece. On the morning of April 25th, George and Kristen took me to the airport, where after a 1.5 hour delay, I boarded my flight back to the United States.